Pausa rapidinho agora para falar de dica de ouro para os papais e mamães. Depois de experimentar a nova Hug Supreme Care Fralda Roupinha, tudo ficou ainda melhor pro meu filho. É a única com canais em X que se adaptam aos movimentos, com 2 vezes proteção noturna e cintura elástica que se adapta ao corpinho do bebê, além de ser super fácil de colocar e tirar. Praticidade pura. Então guarda essa dica. Nova Hug Supreme Care Fralda Roupinha. Bebê, estamos juntos nessa, mais do que nunca. Agora curta seu podcast.
Interrompemos esse podcast para perguntar: quem você quer ser?
Designer, engenheira, pedagoga,
administrador.
Quer saber? O Senac EAD é nota máxima no MEC. Tem cursos de diversas áreas, com conteúdo elaborado por especialistas do mercado e professores mestres e doutores. Ainda tem o Senac Carreiras, conectando estudantes a vagas de emprego em todo o país. Saiba mais em ead.senac.br/graduação.
The Flashy Girl from Flushing, the nanny named Fran.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
Miss Fine.
Oh my goodness. I forgot what that intro sounded like. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Oh, Mr. Sheffield. Sort of a special episode of Oh, Mr. Sheffield, where we're going to talk about not the nanny, but a nanny-adjacent project because it also has Fran Drescher in it. We're talking about The Beautician and the Beast. And who are we? If this is your first episode because you're a huge Beautician and the Beast fan, well, anyway, strap in. I am Shawn Pasquale, and I am here with my lovely and wonderful and talented co-host,
Toria Sheffield.
Bum, ba, ba, bum, ba, 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 ba.
We're back.
We're back, and we're going to do Beautician and the Beast. We watched it. We've digested it. It's a movie that was made in 1997, and I have a lot of thoughts about it. Now, before we start, Toria does not know this, but I have written a small song that I'm going to sing a cappella that I think sums up my feelings and probably Toria's, but I know my feelings of this movie. The song goes like this. Tale as old as time, a movie not so prime, but we'll give it a try, Toria and I. It's Mr. Sheffield time. Fran's a beautician. There's a beast of sorts, a quirky, uneven mix, trying all the tricks in this 90s flick. We wish it would cease. It's a weak release, but Shawn and Toria will tell you the story. Beautician and the Beast.
I'm clapping.
Thank you.
Can you hear it?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Oh
Thank
my
you.
God.
Thank you.
You're pretty. I feel like such a. I feel like such a a Jewish mom. I was gonna be like, he's so. I was like, he's so talented.
I mean, talented or like, what is he wasting his time doing? His wife is a successful attorney.
I'm like, he wrote a whole song. You should hear it. Just comes right into his head.
Okay, so Beautician and the Beast, what is this? It came out in 1997. Rotten Tomatoes, which, look, I looked at the Rotten Tomatoes score and then I looked at the critics, and there are only like 1 or 2 actual ratings from 1997. Everything was like years later. And I feel like that's not fair because people get like bitter and stuff. But it's not, I didn't think it was a great movie. So I feel like the audience score is probably more fair, which is a 46%. I feel like that's probably accurate. It's okay. So it's written, before we get into it, it's written by Todd Graff, who weirdly was an actor on The Nanny. He was in season 4, episode 12, Danny's Dead, Who Has the Will. He played a character named Harvey. Do you remember that character?
Danny's Dead, Who Has the Harvey. Oh, why does that sound? He must have been someone at the funeral, I'm betting.
He probably was. But so he didn't really write anything else. He's an actor. Primarily, he has a couple of nothing like major that he wrote that I noticed on his IMDb. And then it was directed by Ken Kwapis, who directed Sesame Street presents Follow That Bird, The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, and He's Just Not That Into You. So the guy's directed some good, and look, it's a functional movie from a directing standpoint, right? Like, I mean, it looks good. There are a couple of things that I feel like maybe got lost in an edit somewhere. I'd be curious if there was like more.
So, and also, I think I'm probably more forgiving of this movie than you are because I saw it when I was young, which I think always makes a big difference. Like when you first see a movie, and before you like, are thinking analytically, like, oh, like, that beat should have been here, or like, oh, this part was a little weak. But I remember watching it with my sister. We rented it, and we thought it was like totally fun. And so and then I was like, I wonder if other people like, have fondness for this movie because they saw it maybe when they were like in grade school or middle school. And there's like whole Reddit threads devoted to people being like, oh, like, who remembers this? Like, love that movie. Oh, I love this part. So, which always tracks. Like, I do feel like I remember I saw Heavyweights for the first time when I was like 30, and I was like, I don't get it. And everyone was like, how are you not getting this?
So for the purposes of this, I figured we can't really do it like a normal episode. Like, there's no sense in describing the entire movie and then talking about it. So I think we should just kind of go through the scenes. I took notes in order. I'm assuming you did too.
Yeah.
And we can kind of like, we'll give a brief overview. So the movie, if you've never seen the movie and you just really love listening to our voices, thank you. First of all, that's amazing. That's crazy. I guess that's probably just my mom. Hi, Mom. The movie is about Fran Drescher plays Joy Miller, hairstylist / makeup artist.
Notice it's a very non-Jewish name. Miller.
Yes, it's a very non-Jewish name, but then nothing about the rest of the performances is non-Jewish. So she even says she even calls him a mensch, but we'll get into all that. Okay, so but the brief overview: she's a makeup artist from not the Bronx, but
Queens.
Not Queens. Yeah, she's from Queens. She is from Queens.
There you go.
Okay, and she goes to she randomly runs into this guy who mistakes her for a teacher because of this whole convoluted thing that happens. And she ends up in an Eastern European country run by a dictator. And
she's supposed to teach his children and like sort of Western ways.
Yes. And over the course of the film, she falls in love with him and then changes his dictatorship ways, right?
Yes.
Now, I think there's a lot of potential here. In fact, I think the thing that frustrated me, I was reading back through my notes, and you can see me get more less forgiving as the movie goes on, because it starts, especially in the last half, it starts to just feel sloppy, lazy. And that's frustrating because they had clearly a budget and they had a star and I'm shocked that Fran and Peter produced this too. And I'm curious, it's 97. So I'm wondering where within their whole deal does this movie come out, and does that affect what their relationship to the movie is? Cause they're solid writers.
But also yin to the yang, even though I agree with all your points in terms of structure, plot points, and when certain information is revealed, I was like, they should have done that there. They should have done this there. I was delighted to see Fran again, doing what she does best. She was still incredibly magnetic, incredibly, perfect comedic timing. So I still enjoyed the experience overall, probably partly because I love Fran so much and we've spent so much time quote unquote with her. I was like, oh yeah, this is why I love Fran Drescher.
Yeah. I mean, look, yes, Fran is the most enjoyable part of this movie. Timothy Dalton is a close second, although I think he's severely underused. He can be way funnier than they gave him the chance to be. And then the daughter from
Mrs. Doubtfire.
I have other names written. For Mrs. Doubtfire, who is a delight and wasn't in enough movies, in my opinion, in this time, and is a shame that that weirdly, much like we said with the Nanny series as a whole, this movie sidetracks at a certain point, drops the children entirely, and just focuses on the romance part between her and the guy. And that's also what the Nanny did. And I think it's a mistake in both cases. So, okay, but let's get into it. So we open with an animated sequence, which I loved. I was so happy to see an animated Fran. I like when movies start in like a unique and fun way. I like that this ended up being a dream she was having. I really loved the line, "I wasn't even awake to enjoy the kiss," when she gets kissed by the prince.
Well, it's very much a little Disney parody where like, a prince comes over and kisses the beautiful sleeping princess. And then it's clearly Fran Drescher and he's like, "Now we'll get married." And she's like, "What are you talking about? Like, no, I have life to live." It's like her nightmare is basically like, some guy who she doesn't care about, like getting in the way of her dreams.
Yeah. And then she wakes up and she's, this was also great. Like this opening scene, it really, you said earlier to me today, this felt like a first draft, and it really does. Cause like you can tell the first act and a half have been like really worked on a lot, and then like less in the second, because this opening is great. She wakes up and they're like, "Okay, come on. It's like your big time." And you're not really sure like what their it's like something, she's on like a set of some kind. It's like something in like film and TV, and they're talking like very animatedly, like maybe she's the star or something.
Yeah. Or like maybe she's like maybe she's just, gonna be on a TV show or something. And then she walks into a room and she opens up like a bag of makeup, and she's just like this lady's makeup artist on like, what was it? Like not even. She is
auditioning,
basically auditioning to be the full-time makeup artist for the Lotto Girl on the local news, and that's going to be like her big break, her dream job, right?
It's a very funny misdirect.
Yes, and it's also very funny because it's very much like the woman that she's going to be doing her hair and makeup for is like, okay, just but like kind of keep it subtle or simple, and she's like, "Oh yeah, like less is more. That's my motto." And then the end result is like huge Fran Drescher style hair. Tons of makeup, and so
this was the first beat where I was like, they could have gone bigger. Like I was surprised that they didn't go bigger, and I'm going to say that so much throughout this whole thing.
So I said,
except in one scene where they went so crazy, but
I said the same thing because I was watching it with Kyle, and I was like, "Hey, I thought the makeup could have been crazier. And then B, it would have been so much funnier if then we had to see this woman deliver serious news looking like that, as opposed to being the Lotto Girl." It was like an obvious joke. But
and it's like they tried to subvert expectation with the Lotto Girl reveal, which I get, but then at least go for the joke reveal of like what she looks like. Like I don't know, neither was funny enough for me, and so they both kind of like, but I did really appreciate the misdirect. I liked that a lot. I thought that was fun way to write a scene. Then
we cut to a scene that I really, really like because she does that, and then we cut to her home at her parents' place in Queens, and they're all in front of the TV, like eating TV dinners, and she tells them that she didn't get the job, and they gave it to some fancy European, and her mother essentially says, "Don't you think it's time you maybe just like you started teaching night school more, or like, doing something more stable. Basically, like you should settle. You've like tried to pursue your dreams long enough, and now it's getting a little sad." Though she said it nicer than that. And then she gets up to go to the other room, and Fran's father goes, he's like, "Don't listen to your mother. She's not like us. We're dreamers." And she's like, "But Daddy, you run a stationery store." And he goes, "No, that was my dream. I love cards," which I just like this. And like, I think the first act was really fun, actually.
It was. The cards line was great. I loved the opening credits too. I thought they were great. So then we get to, she's teaching night school.
Wait, hold on. One thing I wanted to quickly say, because this sort of sets up her motivations for the whole movie. Fran/Joy says to her mom, like, essentially like, "Mom, like I want to get married and have a family someday, but not until I meet the right guy. And also, I kind of just feel like there's a big whole world out there that I haven't experienced yet. So like, I'll do it when I'm ready." But that like is going to be very important for why she makes her big decision in a couple scenes.
And if you're keeping track, so far the biggest differences between her and Fran Fine, between Joy Miller and Fran Fine, are one is Jewish, one is not.
But I think she is Jewish.
Maybe, but she is Jewish. She might be Jewish, but she doesn't have a Jewish. Anyway, the other big difference is one wants to like explore the world, and I don't really think that was Fran's. She wasn't really. She just wanted to get married. She didn't really ever talk about like leaving the house. She like loved it there. And I think that's it. Oh, and one worked in a bridal shop, and the other one's a hairstylist.
Yeah. Though the real life Fran Drescher did go to beauty school.
There you go. So far it's very nanny, but not like what I liked about the first act is yes, she's got parents, and I mean, my notes are like, okay, Fran Drescher loves like animals and her parents and hair. Those are like her things, right? That's all the themes that are prevalent, right, over and over again.
So, and I'm gonna drop a quote that Fran Drescher said about this movie here, just because I think it's super relevant to what we're talking about. Yeah. I don't know. So I got this from Wikipedia, but the quote isn't right. It doesn't say where this was taken from. So I apologize. I don't know where the quote was originally published in, but it says, worried about the audience's response to her move to film, Drescher modeled Joy after her previous performances. She explained, it was a specific and strategic choice to not have the audience have to work too hard to accept me as another character. I wanted to be an easy transition so they wouldn't have to bite off more than they could chew.
And like, look, I think that's fundamentally looking down on your audience, right? Like underestimating your audience's capability to see you as someone else. So,
yeah. Okay. So then we cut to the beauty school scene that you were about to talk about.
Yes. So we get to this beauty school scene, and this is what I meant by like, now we get like an insane escalation, because like, long story short, there's like a fire, and like the way the fire breaks out is like starts semi-believable and then just gets like ludicrous.
But I don't mind that. I think that's very fun and funny. Like I don't need the big goofy fire set piece that's going to lead to another really goofy thing to be like grounded in reality, because it's basically like one of her students, this actually made me laugh. He tries to light a cigarette in class. And by the way, Fran, this whole scene made me laugh because it starts with her, leading the class and saying like, she's like looking, everyone has like these mannequin heads in front of them and they're doing makeup, and she's like kind of walking by and making comments, and she's like, the mole's in the wrong place. And she's like, everybody, the mole goes on the left, so it bounces out the cigarette. And then everyone goes, ah. And then she like walks by another girl and she's like, it's called Revlon, not Little Dutch Boy. It's like, that made me laugh. But then, this one sassy man in the class lights a cigarette right by a flammable wig. And then another student in the class grabs instead of grabbing a bottle of water to spray, accidentally sprays hairspray on the wig. Then another student trying to help grabs a broom, but accidentally just knocks the head across the room, which just carries the flame to a new location. And then the fire breaks out completely.
And Fran keeps running back in. She gets everybody outside, and then she realizes there's all these animals, like class pets, I guess.
Well, this was the question. I was like, unclear. So is this normally a science classroom that they're using for beauty school at night?
Yes, that was the implication, because the desks looked like science class desks too.
Also, then it's a little dark that there's so many animals. But maybe it's like a zoology class.
Maybe, yeah, like all high schools have. So so she gets all the humans out, and then she like runs back and forth to save all the animals, and
which is very like, Fran Fine as well, like an animal lover. Absolutely. She also, when she's even trying to save a snake, and she's putting him in a faux snakeskin bag, and she's like, "I promise it's vinyl." Which was very, this character is imbued. You can tell, and we'll get there throughout the film. It's imbued with Fran Drescher's real life values, much as Fran Fine was.
Yes, of course. She wears her values on her sleeve, and she's very consistent, and that is nice to see. And she definitely gets points for that. If points are needed. I mean, I love Fran. I think her stuff is great. Like, I think criticism is fair and valid, and I don't feel like I'm being like needlessly mean, so Okay, and then so this leads to she gets written up in the paper, hero teacher, blah blah blah, right?
Because she literally runs out holding the last of the cages, and she's like covered in smoke, and her hair is a mess. And someone's like, "Look over here," and it's like she does like a glamour shot while holding like cages of guinea pigs.
Yeah, and she meets this guy who we're going to call him Ira because he's got a very complex name. But I couldn't place him at first, and then I realized he's the guy who is Ace Ventura's guide in Ace Ventura 2. And it made me so happy. I was like, oh, that's who that guy is. So that's great. He shows up. He's sort of like a Niles, I guess you would say.
No, I wouldn't say he's a Niles. He's
Ian McNeice is the actor.
He's a very sweet, lovable, portly man who sort of is very like harried and is always like, oh no, like I'm gonna get in so much trouble. And but we sort of blew over something, which is yes, she gets. So there's this picture snapped of her, and it cuts to the headline in the New York papers, which is literally like, local teacher hero, saves everyone from science classroom. And so that's clearly been written up, which then leads to her just, walking down the street, like probably a few days later or a few weeks later. And then she is approached by this man in a car, which just seemed very stressful at first. And then he starts following her. And it's this man you were talking about, Ira, who... And she's like, why are you following me? And she's like gonna pepper spray him, but then she realizes it's just like she's holding a breath spray or something. She's like, what did she say? That's what is it called?
Banaka?
Banaka, yeah.
Yeah.
And he's like, no. He's like, I am like safe. I'm a safe person. And by the way, I did read, they hired a dialect coach from this movie to sort of make up an accent that would sound like Eastern European-ish. And so the actors actually are doing a sort of like type of dialect that was made for them. And so, but he's like, no, he's like, I'm Ira. He's like, I am from Slovakia. Slotvetsia. And he's like, I work for our president. And he's like, he has 4 children, and he wanted me to come to America to find the best teacher in America to, work with his children for 6 months. And he's like, this is actually one of my favorite lines of the movie. And he holds up the paper featuring her. And let me find that quote. Hold on one sec. I have it in mind. He holds up the paper and he's like, you're brave, selfless, and willing to die. His Excellency respects that quality in a teacher. Which is like, I love that, you'd respect willing to die as a quality in a teacher. and he's like, so you would be paid like $40,000 for 6 months, which, I should have checked how much money is that in 1997.
It's a lot, because $40,000 a year was like a decent wage in 1997. So $40,000 for 6 months. Yeah, no, it's a lot of money.
Ooh, look, it's like job. Basically $77,000 for half a year. And he's also like, and then this is where, she's like, oh, I don't know, like, Eastern Europe. And he's like, it's basically Paris, but Paris 50 years ago. And he's like, and a woman of your caliber shouldn't just settle for this. Like, she should see the world, which instantly does that little light bulb in her head. Sure. Like, oh yes, like I do feel like there's a big adventure waiting for me. And like, maybe this is it. And then we cut to her at home, like packing all her stuff, and her mom's like, don't go. This is crazy. You have a life here. And she's essentially like, Mom, like I have dreams and I want to see the world, and I'm going. And this is, by the way, we've just described, this is minute 10 of the movie. So we've set a lot up.
Yeah, we gotta move through this quicker too.
Okay. So she gets, I think we can breeze past this part, because it's basically, so she gets to the country, Slovakia, and there's literally like sheep on the runway, and they drive her to this imposing castle, and she walks in, and there's this huge Stalin-esque statue there, and she's kind of like, and someone's calls, she's like, who's that? And Ira's like, it's His Excellency. And she's like, wait, I thought you said he was a president. And he's kind of like, tomato. And you're like, what's
and their
going
slogan,
on?
the country's slogan is hard work today, happiness tomorrow, which sounds like the current US slogan, quite frankly.
Oh, yeah,
and I loved it.
And there's also, like sort of these very Stalin-esque strong man posters all over town. And, and the people are basically dressed like peasants. So, and she's supposed to meet this man when she gets there. She's of course Fran Drescher. So she's trying to do all her makeup and her hair and she's late. So then we have this moment where we meet His Excellency, played by Timothy Dalton, aka James Bond. And what was the James Bond Moon? Was he the Moon one?
Moon Raper?
Pausa rapidinho agora para falar de dica de ouro para os papais e mamães. Depois de experimentar a nova Hug Supreme Care Fralda Roupinha, tudo ficou ainda melhor pro meu filho. É a única com canais em X que se adaptam aos movimentos, com 2 vezes proteção noturna e cintura elástica que se adapta ao corpinho do bebê, além de ser super fácil de colocar e tirar. Praticidade pura. Então guarda essa dica. Nova Hug Supreme Care Fralda Roupinha. Bebê, estamos juntos nessa, mais do que nunca. Agora curta seu podcast.
Moonraker, yes. That's no, that's Roger Moore. That's Roger Moore.
Oh, so what was Timothy Dalton?
I don't know. I gotta look it up. Let's see. Timothy Dalton Bond. I'm not a Bond guy, so I don't.
Me
I don't
either.
I don't
think
really.
they're silly.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Let's see. License to Kill, The Living Daylights. He was in.
And I feel like
That's it.
he
was also in Hot
he was
Fuzz.
regarded as the worst Bond, right? Like
So-
famously.
I think so. So I know him from The Rocketeer, in which he played the bad guy and was great. And then I also know him from Hot Fuzz. So and he's on Doom Patrol and he's great on that too. But I love Timothy Dalton. And this is still when I had a lot of hope for this movie because I knew nothing about this movie going in. I rented it on Hoopla and I started it cold. Shout out to Hoopla, by the way. Check your local library for everything because they have it and it's free and it's dope. So I was excited. So like my note for this is like, oh my gosh, Timothy Dalton's perfect. He plays intimidating well, but he's got great timing. Like this is going to go so well. And then we meet Fran. Then we meet the kids. And I was like, oh, putting her with kids is such a smart move. And like, and the kids, do you know who the 3 kids are?
The actors?
Do you know which one of them has like a moment of fame in the 90s?
You mean the guy from Seventh Heaven or the
No.
daughter from Mrs. Doubtfire?
No.
The other girl? Oh wait, was she in True Beverly Hills?
No. So the middle child, Heather DeLoach, was the very famous Blind Melon Bee girl from the video in which the little girl is wearing the bumblebee costume. It was like very popular. What's that song called? All I can say is that my life is pretty. No Rain. No Rain. She was the little bee girl. Now. And she was also on the cover of their album. Yeah. So I was like, whoa, the bee girl got movie work? This is crazy. This movie's going to be great.
Wait, hold on. Let's also take a quick step back to introduce the children. Basically she's late for meeting His Excellency and he barges into her room and yells at her and is like, never again. And she's like, okay. She wakes up the next day and now there are these 4 kids literally just staring down at her. There's the boy, Carl. He's clearly like, has a lot to prove and is trying to be like sort of the big man like his father. There's Katrina, who I think might be the oldest, and was the eldest daughter in Mrs. Doubtfire. I should just look up her name, but for some reason I'm committed to just referring to her as the Mrs. Doubtfire kid. And she is clearly sort of sweet and nice and smart, but maybe a little reserved. And then there's there's a third child, Marcia, who's clearly a girl who like thinks of herself as like an ugly duckling and doesn't have self-confidence. And then there's a little toddler boy who really only he actually has probably one of my biggest laugh out moments in this whole movie, but we'll get there. But so anyway, so she's introduced to them and they're basically like, oh, our old, you're not like anything like our old teacher. And, she was old and gross and mean. And they were like, we've never met an American. And that's when Carl goes, he's like, we don't want you to rape our mind with your cultural imperialism. And Fran Drescher perfectly goes, Carl, you only get one chance to make a first impression, which I just thought was very funny. But I was, as you said, I was totally in it at this point in the movie.
I was in it. I first of all, I wrote, God, Fran looks amazing when she wakes up in the morning in this scene. That's her best look in the whole movie, in my opinion. I know she still has makeup on, but I love the way she looks in that beat. I just think she looks gorgeous. Classic Fran. And yeah, man, I was into it. My note for the breakfast scene is like, this is interesting. There's like a lot of echoes of The Nanny in this scene, the awkward family dynamic, the father who needs his heart melted, the cute kids without a mother, just looking to be loved. And
again, for context, I'm guessing that even our listeners who have seen this movie might not have seen it in a very long time. Then we cut to like they're all at breakfast. It's like Fran and the kids, and they're having kind of cute conversation. And then Timothy Dalton walks in, and he's like has a newspaper, and he's like huffing and puffing, and she's like, "Oh, are you going to join us?" And he's like, "I have no time to join for breakfast." And as he's walking out, he hears her tell the children, and she's like, "Oh, some of my favorite childhood memories were sitting at breakfast with my father. He used to eat so much that he'd have to roll up his shirt and then he'd tug out his belly button." And like Timothy Dalton literally like pauses because you can tell they set this up well really early, which is he's very tough. He can have angry outbursts, but he really does want to be a good father. Like and then so he hears that and he's like, "Oh, well, okay, I will join." Because he's like, well, this woman just said her best childhood memories are with her father. So he sits like all the way across the table. And it's like, it doesn't go that well, but it's like, it's like, okay, we're setting up the stew of we hope this will be, right?
Yeah. And it's unfortunate because then it's like, the kids don't really get the payoff they deserve except for Katrina, the eldest. Yeah. Lisa Jacob is her last is her name. She's the only one who gets like they kind of do like a scene or two with Carl, but like it kind of doesn't really work because the two scenes contradict each other. Like in one scene, he's like into her at first and like, but he's not. He then reveals in that scene like, I'm not really into you. My dad just told me I have to like be tough and like take what I want. And she's like, okay, well, that's not gonna work. But then later in the movie, he's like, I'm in love with you so much, and you're like, what?
Well, I think and I know we're like kind of jumping all over the place, but
I think for the purposes of a movie, I think we kind of have to, like. I don't know.
Okay, I don't know. If we're going to talk about,
we never did a movie before, but
never done a movie before. What if we can't?
But it is on Hoopla, so I think we have to go. If you're listening and you're a little lost because we are jumping around, you can pause it and go watch the movie for free right now with a library card. So like, it's not like we're talking about a lost movie,
Yeah, it's also all over other places you can rent for like $3.99 or $4.99. But what I was going to say is so my biggest note about the whole movie was the kids, they're so primed to have satisfying arcs that are truly like, Fran it very Sound of Music-esque, right? Like,
yes.
There's so much about this that is basically like, it's like Fran Drescher doing The Sound of Music. And I recently saw The Sound of Music weirdly with my niece, and I was like, again, like blown away. It's such a like solid movie. And you're like, because when the children start to come out of their shells, it feels so earned. And when the children then have a really strong relationship with their, nanny, it feels so earned. This sort of is almost like, well, we know how this is supposed to go, so we're not going to show you.
And it's a shame because the beginning, there's another beat in the beginning here where okay, so first we get that beat that Toria described, right? Where like she's walking in and she's like, oh, you have like a giant statue of the president? That's weird, So, okay, and I'll buy that she's like not the sharpest knife in the drawer, Joy, right? But then they have her teaching class and she's like, okay, whatever, where are you in class? And they're like, we left off reading our, history books or whatever. And they start reading the history book, and it's this completely fabricated history of like how like the president, their dad, like, started the Gulf War or whatever. It's like complete nonsense. And Joy calls it out, and she's like, I'm not going to teach them this. Like, so like from the get-go, I was like, oh, this is interesting. Like they're setting up so much interesting stuff. I was like, okay, here's what I want this movie. They're going to like pay off all the kids stuff. They're going to pay off her realizing like, you know, as she's going to fall in love with this guy, but as she's falling in love with him, she's going to slowly start to be like, yo, dude, you're like brainwashing people and not good and you need to change. And I was like here for it. And that's kind of not like it tries to go there, but none of it's really satisfying or it doesn't reach it. And it's so I want to talk about like where it kind of goes off, right? What else do we have to like kind of set up? Oh, so the daughter, you find out, is in an arranged marriage, the eldest daughter, but she is in love with somebody else. Okay.
Yes.
And we find out that the person she's in love with is this like little rebellion boy who's like the leader. So he's the leader of a rebellion. Okay. Now it's at this point in the movie where I start asking questions that take me out of the movie, which to me is like bad movie, right? Cause like my first question is like, wait, there's like dissidents? Cause like they don't really like, he's like an asshole and he's like obviously brainwashing people like and like writing fake textbooks, but like it doesn't seem like there's any real, they don't do enough. They introduce this idea of dissidents and you go, oh, okay, I guess we're going to find out more about like the cruelty of what he's really doing. And then we kind of don't like ever. They never really delve into what he's actually doing wrong other than like lying and plastering his face everywhere. And
you know that like there's no unions in this country. There's no such thing as overtime. You know that anybody who seems to dissent against the government is going to be like, I mean, it sounds like these guys also did some bombing. So maybe they rightfully needed to have some discipline, but you know, there's also literally like a line. I loved it when Fran is talking to the kids and she's like, okay, let's do some basics. Like, you know what a president is, but what do you call the guy that runs against him? And one of the kid goes, loser. And the other is like, traitor. And then
missing.
Marsha goes, missing.
Yeah, look, I get it. Like, I just think
his political opponents clearly disappear.
I think I needed just one scene, and I get it. They were like, we got to keep him nice enough that she falls in love with him and that the audience accepts him as someone that she could love. But like, but if he's nice enough for that, the premise kind of falls apart. And if he's not, then you know the reality of what he actually would be like. And then that begs more from the movie, I think.
Yes. Well, when I was watching with Kyle, he started, there's this moment when she sees Timothy Dalton kind of like go into his little toddler son's room and just like kind of cradle him in his arms. And she's sort of like peers her head in, and you can see it's this moment where she's like, oh, like I'm falling for him. And then Kyle's literally like, oh yeah, he's a fascist. Oh, he's a dictator, but he's holding his son. Like,
he's one of the loving fascists.
Yeah, like, oh, but he's a good guy underneath it all. But I think probably what could have been good, and maybe also we're just more a little politically savvy than an audience 30 years ago. And we're kind of like, sure. Oh no, like that is a bad man.
Sure.
Like there's no, like, but I think what they could have done is like, maybe the narrative was like, our president, he has, he's opening up to the West. He wants to be a progressive leader. He wants to change the way his father did things. But then we show up and we see that he's actually still like completely like,
well, he doesn't know how to change.
Yes. Yeah. He's like trying to be better, but is also has all these old preconceived notions. And something where it's because there is another version of this movie, not the one with Fran Drescher, where this is like a horrific nightmare story. It's like, you know what it's like? It's like The Last King of Scotland with Forrest Whitaker.
There's like a great horror movie in this. Like did you great horror movie. Did
you see The Last King of Scotland? Like it literally is a movie that fills you with dread, because it's basically like, this Westerner at first thinks this leader is pretty, at least okay, and starts to realize like, oh no, this is a very, very, very corrupt situation, and like my life is in danger.
I want to do it with like like a female lead and like the kids too, and you make the kids all creepy and stuff. Like it'd be so cool. So okay, so
but anyway,
the thing that I noticed about this that I did like is that it's another theme of Fran's work, although it's different this time. So like the nanny reveled in like class clash, right? Upper class versus middle class. That was like what the nanny did. And this is culture class, at least at first. Because like these are still early in my notes when I wrote like, oh, I like this, right? This is going to be like a culture clash kind of look. And they kind of dropped the ball on that too. Weirdly.
I think what really, where they end up kind of like laying it on the thickest is Fran is guiding this man to show his warmth. Like he is a person who's been like, I bet you if you're talking to like the person who wrote the script and they're like, you know, trying to tell you what they were attempting to do at least, or they're telling you what they were attempting to do, they'd probably be like, oh yeah, the crux of their relationship and the arc is that this is a guy who actually has a lot of warmth and love, but has like literally been, you know, his grandfather was a dictator, his father was a dictator, and he is conditioned to say like, you have to show strength. Showing strength is the way you keep control of your people, and that's actually the way you keep them safe, which is that is a very strong man Eastern Bloc way of thinking about actually taking care of your people. Yeah. And so she's like, sort of like, why don't you actually talk to the people who live on your estate? Like, why don't you go up and say hi? And like, you know, actually it's a sign, like if you arrest a political prisoner and then the country is in outrage because they think it was unfair, like it's a sign of strength to actually let him go and release him as a gesture that, you know, you welcome differing opinions in your country, and, you know, and it will show that you're actually like civilized. So she has a, you know, a very, it's like, what I love about this character with Fran is if it's the very non-cynical, idealized version of what like America means. We all know, I think now that like it's awful. There's so much crap. There's so many bad things, but it's like, if you could just, like whittle down to the core of what the American experience or dream is supposed to be, it's democracy, it's workers' rights, it's, you know, it's not leading through fear, but leading through, you know, public opinion and actually, you know, like she has one line where she's like, you know, a leader shouldn't instill fear. They should earn respect. Yeah. And she also has a line later, which I liked, which is, she's sort of convincing him to release this, you know, basically the daughter's boyfriend gets arrested and it's all over, you know, local, you know, the country's news, you know, local dissenter held captive in castle, blah, blah, blah. And she is saying to Timothy Dalton, like, when you have all of these foreign dignitaries here at this sort of big party you're going to be hosting, you should announce that you're going to release this prisoner. And he's like, that will be a sign of weakness. And she's like, no, it'll teach you that you don't have to be a tyrant to have people follow you.
So, okay. And if the movie was about that, then like, I think you don't need the children. And like the movie just should have been about that, because what ends up happening is they keep piling plots onto this movie, right? So she gets there, she meets the kids. Okay, it's going to be about a lady teaching these kids. He's like, I miss my wife. He's sad. He's got a cold relationship with the children. Okay, she's going to teach him Western ways. And then she's also going to like melt this guy's heart and get him to like spend more time with his kids. And like, that's one movie. But then there's like a lady comes to this place and like, he is like, this guy who's, you know, there's a movie you pitched, right? And there's like this dissident that he arrests and like all this stuff. But like, that's all in this movie. Like,
I think though, with
like, and it's like, weird because it's also so slow paced.
I think you could do both. It's just they lean too far in the direction. There was a lot of scenes with Fran and Timothy Dalton. They really leaned into it. I think you could have struck a balance because, well, and this is, you know, we didn't even, well, I guess we said this, but, you know, it's obvious by now that, you know, even though she and Timothy Dalton start off from a very contentious place where he's like, you know, you always talk back and, you know, you're filling my children's head and you're making them like opinionated and you're, you know, this and that. And I just want you to teach them science. There's also clearly a lot of sexual tension between these two people. And he's clearly like, you know, gives her a longer leash than he probably would have if she didn't look like that. Like I literally said to Kyle, I was like, if he didn't have the hots for her, she would have been arrested like 10 times already.
Yeah. The problem I had with that is like, it's Kyle's issue, right? Where it's like, you're like, well, but he's kind of a monster. And she kind of knows, like, as soon as she is like, you are like lying to your children about history, she should like, and she realized that, like, she should like, they should have gone with that thread, but she just kind of ignores that ever happened. And then like they start to fall in love. And there's a lot of, this is why I said, I thought the movie maybe had a lot of cut scenes because like, so like you get this scene where like, you know, she gets, you know, she's in the country and she like out of nowhere one night decides she wants to go out and see the sights. Mm-hmm. And like she gets dropped off and then we find out that the daughter had snuck in the car with her, I guess, which seems like implausible, but okay. And then she's like, oh my God, how are you out here? Like, we got to get you back. Like, you're the daughter of the president. Like, you can't just be wandering around out here. We got to find a phone. And the daughter's like, I know where we can go. And she leads her to this bar that's literally 2 feet away from where they get dropped off in the car. And she's like, we could go here. And then she does a secret knock on the door and gets led into this like underground nightclub. And like, they're having like a secret meeting in another secret room in the secret club. Mm-hmm. And that's where like the dissidents are. And it's like, all happens very conveniently and very quickly. And it's like, the movie is juggling so much that like, then they have to like do these like scenes and like, they have to quickly like get you there. And it really takes you out of it. And then it's like, why aren't people mad that the president's daughter, like, why aren't they freaking out at least that she's just walking around?
You know, you get the impression that she comes to this club a lot. Like, remember, she hands her clothes to the DJ and the DJ is clearly like, he's back there with their boyfriend. So you get the impression she sneaks out a lot. She, you know, she's clearly, believes that these rebels are on the right side and that they're patriotic. So she clearly has some really big philosophical differences with her father. It's just the whole thing. Like, why don't the
rebels just put a gun to her head and be like, all right, Dad, you got to make some changes or we're going to kill your daughter.
They're clearly not committed enough because that would be the way to do it.
Because it's really not that bad there. They just like don't have unions, I guess.
Well, okay, but here's the thing. We're also given the context that he is, you know, first of all, this is clear. This is post the fall of the Soviet Union. And this country is trying to modernize, but it is happening very slowly and super not at the pace that like the younger generations want.
Yeah.
And I could kind of speaking to all of this too, there's a scene where, you know, once Fran and Timothy Dalton have kind of like established much more of a connection. You can tell there is really something brewing, but neither of them are kind of willing to call it out. He takes her on a tour of his estate. And it leads to this really fun scene where like, it turns out she knows like literally all the peasants' names because she like definitely like goes and chats with people. And she's like, hi, like, how's your cold? And then he's like, is that man new here? And she's like, he's been working here 50 years. And he goes, oh, right. He had a new hat. Like he's too embarrassed to admit that he like doesn't know anybody who works for him. And then he ends up taking her to a local factory because he kind of wants, you know, because she's also like, you should say hi. You should show people your warmth side. And he starts doing it with her that day. And he starts to like love it and get like super energized. So he takes her to a factory where there'll be like lots of new people to meet. And there's this great moment where like, he's literally like, they raise him up on like a crane and he's like waving and there's like this stately music playing. And he's clearly like, yes, like my people. And meanwhile, Fran, she's like standing next to this guy and she's like, this is pretty incredible, right? But this doesn't happen every day. And the guy's just like, well, now I'm going to have to work later. I'm going to miss my dinner. And she's like, yeah, but at least you're getting overtime. And he's like, what's overtime? And she's like, who's your union rep? And he's like, what's a union?
So then, okay. But it's like, it breaks it though, because it's like, that's the thing. Not that he's like teaching his children fake history, not like all of the statues of him all over the place, not the dissidents that she met 2 scenes prior, not the way that everybody's afraid of him, not the way that like he doesn't know who anyone is or what anything does.
But Shawn,
like,
she saw him like hold his baby. Like her character has a very like, oh, you like sort of vibe every time he does something. Like objectively
horrible.
Like horrible. So, but in this scene though,
crazy.
What happens is he ends up, he's like waving at the factory people, and then he looks over, and she's literally like Rosie, not Rosie the Riveter, Norma Ray, standing on a podium and clearly like teaching people about unions. So much that it literally that she causes the workers to go on strike, which makes international news, because it's basically like this sort of old style, sort of pseudo in between democracy, but still has one leg in Soviet era shit, is like, those people are like, they're not taking this anymore. So she is literally causing like low-key worker revolution.
Yeah, I mean, and it would have, there needed to be, so like she goes to this factory and like she tells everybody about the union. And then the next scene, we see her sneaking the daughter down into the dungeon to see the boyfriend. And it's like, okay, it would have been great if there was like a link there where Joy makes the decision, like, I'm going to start a coup. I'm going to like change things. But like, she never actually makes that decision, because then like 2 scenes later, she's like playing Twister with the kids, and like she hasn't done anything about anything. It's very strange. And then now at this point in the movie, we get a new plot, which is, and I wrote this literally at this point in the movie. It's like halfway through the movie. We get this guy who works for the president, who's like the serious general guy,
Prime Minister. He's the prime minister.
Yeah. And he hears about the strike at the factory, which I guess was inspired because Joy told one guy about unions one time. I wish starting a union was that easy. Even inspiring people to start a union. You know how long people have been yelling about unionizing the comic book industry, but no one will actually do it. Anyway, but she does it. So the prime minister comes in and he's like, oh, what's going on? And I literally wrote, oh, wait, the prime minister now is going to get increasingly suspicious and angry. And then eventually he's going to try to take over. And like, it's literally what happened.
But no, I think that they laid the seeds for that within the first 15 minutes of the movie. The second you're introduced to that character, you're like, this guy's going to be the guy that tries to that is going to be very displeased with Joy's influence on their leader.
Yeah, but then that guy goes away right away. It's very uneven. I don't know. Look, the Twister thing was cute. I like that a lot. I thought that scene was fun. I like the son and the dog collar. but it was like,
that was my laugh out loud moment.
It's like too few and far between though, right?
That beat was like such a Billy Madison era beat. Where basically, so, the Timothy Dalton is like furious that now there's these unions, and he marches up to Fran to talk to her about it. But she's like, clearly having so much fun with the kids. And then the youngest child, who's like 3, kind of just pops up, and he has not a collar, but a cone that dogs get so they don't scratch. And he's like, why is my son in that? And she's like, well, he's not going to bite his nails. And he's like, he's the president's son. He should not look like a dog. And she's like, I know he's not a dog. And then she picks up a cookie and she just tosses it in his mouth. And
he eats.
And the way, just the quick cut to it connecting with his mouth was so goofy. And I did laugh out loud.
Yeah, me too. Look, but the whole movie should have been peppered with that. Like, they were trying to make this movie's billed as a comedy, and there's just not enough of the comedy part,
well, yes. I mean,
and so then that moment that moment sandwiched between everything else just feels wildly out of place, because you're like, well, where did this sense of humor suddenly come from?
Well, this is what I'll say too. as we mentioned this before, that it kind of felt more like a first draft, because some of the points that you're making or the critiques you're making, I'm like, oh, I could almost guess what like the writer would, his answer would be, which is, okay, yes, there's, points throughout the movie when you're like, shouldn't she have been more alarmed sooner? And I think, the arc that they were trying to show is that, or the story they were trying to show was that, yes, this woman sees these things, but also feels that there's a good man underneath this who is capable of change. And she believes in his ability to change. And so she is nudging him in the right direction. And that's why the sort of, third act low point is that she thinks he's going to do this really grand gesture and release the prisoner at this, large, sort of foreign summit. And she is, waiting for it and excited for it. And by the way, by this point, he's already agreed to give like workers' rights and, let them have unions, blah, blah, blah. And then when he gets the moment where he was supposed to be like, and I'm releasing like Alexander so-and-so, but he doesn't. He's just like, and thank everybody for coming. Enjoy the night. And she goes right up to him in that moment. And she's like, why didn't you do the thing? The whole point of this was that you do the thing. And he's like, well, I realized I didn't need to. They're already loving me. And then this is what breaks them up. She's basically like, if you can't see that doing the right thing, even when you don't have anything to gain, is like what makes you civilized and good, she's like, then you really are a monster and I can't have anything to do with you. So it's the moment where she's like, oh, this man who I thought actually had a good heart under all of this and was going to change and be the person I believe he can be, didn't. And then she's out. But so, like, I agree with you. It doesn't like,
it doesn't land, right? Like that's the issue, is like, yes, those are all things that happen. But sandwiched in between all of that too is like, all of these like leaps, right? Like there's this beat where like, when he first tells her, oh, you should plan a party. And she's like, I would never be able to, like, I don't know how to do that at all. And then he's like, I believe you can do it. And she's like, okay. And then she does it. And it's like, it's perfect, except for one scene where she has to kill a chicken for some reason.
I would argue it's not perfect. My note was, lol, when you actually see the party, it looks like a tacky children's birthday party. You realize she's put different sections of the buffet are representing different countries. So there's like cheeseburgers for America. There's like baguettes for France. And there's troll dolls in each country. Is like, the French one is like wearing a beret, and the American troll looks like Uncle Sam. And they have like little, like, sort of like tacky, like flags sticking out of them. So she still did it in a very Queen's way.
Yes, but
you're right. People were having an excellent time. It wasn't a disaster in any way. And more importantly, the scene that follows up, I'm not sure I can do this, is a montage of her doing it. Like, forget what even the end result. Like I can't do this. Sure you can. And then surely you would see her not be able to do it, but then she like does it, and it's like, yeah, it's ugly, but like, it's fine. I didn't see the ugliness of the party as a payoff to the joke, I'm not sure I can do this, because it's a party and people are there. Honestly, that was not one of the parts that bothered me. I thought it was like played like, it actually was like, I was like, oh, I don't need to see her like failing and then succeeding. It was more just like the setup for this funny montage where she's planning like a huge party for all these foreign dignitaries. And she's literally like, has ordered like boxes of like grocery store egg rolls from the States. And it also featured one of my other favorite laugh out loud moments of this movie, which is basically one of the kitchen workers is like, I don't know how to make this recipe, this chicken cutlet that you're talking about. Show me how to make it. And Fran's like, okay, I'll show you. And this woman literally leads her to a live chicken. And Fran's like, oh my God, it's alive? And the woman's like, of course it's alive. You wanted it fresh. Like, if you want me to cook it, you have to show me how to do it. And literally hands her a butcher knife so that she can kill this chicken with her bare hands. And, she like makes everybody clear out of the room because she's like,
all Fran had to do was be like, just like come back when the chicken is dead. Like, you just kill it normal.
Well, my favorite moment was Fran is like, doesn't know. She's like, she's trying to scare it to death by being like, boo. And Ira comes in his base and is like, what are you doing? And she's like, well, I was trying to make this chicken just sort of keel over and die. But, apparently he's not a true patriot. He doesn't want to die for his country. We then cut to the chicken's face. I don't know how they got the chicken to make these expressions because he literally looks like pained that he heard her say that. And he slowly marches across the table, steps into a pot, and lowers himself into like dramatic sort of like dun, 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 dun. And then as he lowers himself in, a tear drops from his eye. I was like, this is so goofy and so funny that this chicken's like, I will die for my country. And hey, spoiler alert, the chicken doesn't die. She keeps him as a pet.
She keeps him as a pet, which is classic Fran. And then so yeah, okay, so they're falling in love. She tells him to throw this party. He throws the party. You think he's going to do this really nice thing and let the guy out of prison. He doesn't. In between, right before we have the party, she actually has this scene where she confesses to him like what she's like, look, I got to be honest with you, because they're like in love, right? But she's like, I got to be honest with you, and then she tells him her whole deal. I'm not really a teacher. I'm a fucking hairstylist. Like. And he's not upset. He's totally chill with it. He's completely okay with it. Okay. And then he doesn't let the kid out of jail. And she like gets in his face and she's like, you suck for this and whatever. Right. And then she walks outside and then the bad guy, prime minister guy comes up and he's like, I'm going to blackmail you. And she's like, well, you can't because he already knows that I'm not a teacher for real.
Well, no, that's before they had the big blow. This is when she's still on good terms with Timothy Dalton.
But even
this is part. I get what you're saying. You're like, why did they handle all of this in this way? Like the puzzle piece of making this a big culmination, they like kind of blew. Like she shouldn't have told him that she was a teacher and then that she wasn't a teacher and have him be like, no, you're great. I don't even care.
No, don't tell the big secret of the movie. And then the bad guy comes and the bad guy's like, I'm going to tell your big secret. And she's like, I already did. And he's like, no, the other secret that you've been taking his daughter to go see the boyfriend. And it's like, I don't know, man. At this point, they're so close to each other that doesn't seem like a thing he's going to get mad at.
Yes. And also like he's about to... He would be totally willing to release this kid at this point.
Yeah, it's crazy that is the beat.
Is the reveal that she is not who she says she is, like, and also that she has been like undermining him this whole time by going against his wishes for his daughter's like romantic life should have come out at the same time. So it's like, I don't even really know you. Like, I feel like you were literally just sent here to destroy my career. You're like a plant of some kind. Like, and she'd be like totally insulted by that. And she'd be like, how can you say that? I care so much about you. And then he'd be like, I'm not releasing the prisoner. And then she'd be like disgusted with him. And be like, you're a monster.
But instead, they undercut that. And so instead, she's like, I can't believe you're not going to release the kid, whatever. And then the bad guy prime minister is like, well, guess what? And she's like, whatever. I snuck your daughter down. She like tells him, I snuck your daughter down to see the kid. Like, what are you going to do about it? But then like out of nowhere, he threatens to like backhand the daughter. Like, and so then they're like, because they already undercut the impact of like what you just pitched, right? Which is like all of these things come to fruition. The emotion is there. He's mad with her and then she's mad with him. But instead of all of that, they have to fabricate this like, oh, and you're going to hit your daughter? You are a monster.
Because Katrina like sort of said something to him like, like you're terrible and you're a horrible leader and, everybody, I hate you. And then he literally raises his arm as if he's going to slap her.
And that's the moment. That's when she goes, you are a beast, which like, okay, we didn't need to like force the word beast into the movie just because of the title, but whatever. And it's like, it feels like such a missed opportunity and it makes everything feel so messy because the thing she gets mad at isn't even like where did that come from? When has he ever been abusive or violent?
I would say though, that was just adding to the pile. The thing that really was her being like, I can't do this anymore, was that he didn't release the political prisoner. And the reason was like, well, I don't even have to, because it seems like everyone likes me now. And she's like, that is so far from the point of why you were supposed to do the right thing. And,
Yeah.
but and then it was like, and then he got mad. So she was like, basically she's like, you're not who I thought you were. And which is just sort of
now
like, well,
we should note there are now 17 minutes left in this movie. And you're like, wow, that doesn't seem a lot of time. There's a lot of dangling threads. We haven't even talked about the kids in like 40 minutes, I feel like. And that's because the kids haven't really been in the movie in 40 minutes.
Yes. And there is even like, while the oldest daughter's thread is the most consistent one, Carl's little subplot of like wanting to be a painter completely gets dropped after like the first time he says it. We never really go back to it like in any substantive way. And then the arc that I was so excited about was the Marsha arc. Because she is, she's this kind of, chubby girl, clearly has, doesn't think she's worth anything. And and we don't see her and Fran have a single conversation in this movie, but then they kind of like try to cheat it by, at one moment, Timothy Dalton walks up and is talking and he's like, what is Marsha wearing? Or Martha, I can't,
Marsha.
What is like, what is she wearing? Marsha. And then this fun there was like a little nod to The Sound of Music where, if you've seen that movie, there's like, Maria or Julie Andrews makes the children play clothes out of old drapes. And it's like kind of this big point in the movie. And so in this movie, he's like, what is Marsha wearing? And she's like, she's like, I made her this dress out of those old Ralph Lauren curtains. And then literally Marsha like twirls and goes, I'm big and beautiful. And then like skips off. And you're like, okay. So you told, the whole thing, like show, don't tell in writing. It's like you told and you didn't show. Cause that would have been
the whole arc.
This is like, you remember even in like School of Rock when, you like, that movie works so well because all those kids have arcs and if they're earned with Jack Black's character. And
so we're at 17 minutes left and they're mad at each other and we get Joy's leaving. And so we get a funny beat that is not at all earned where the son is like, I painted a picture of you naked and to Joy. And you're like, I don't understand. He said a minute ago, like he just wanted to be an artist, but it didn't have anything to do with him being in love with her. And like, why did they have to shoot? It kind of falls flat, even though like the picture is funny. They should have just gone with, he's a horny kid. They should have done what they tried to do with Brighton, like they just leaned into the comedy. Anyway, then she says goodbye to all the kids. But at this point you haven't seen, most of the kids for more than a second or two. So it kind of doesn't land the way that it could have. And then you get a bunch of scenes. She goes home to America and then you get a bunch of scenes of them being sad around the house, just like Mr. Sheffield and Fran did when they broke up. And then he realizes in his sadness that he's a dictator because of love. And in that moment I wrote down, what do you think his first wife was like? Was she a monster?
Well,
did he not love her?
I'm sure it was an arranged marriage. So it's more that I think, I bet you the screenwriter would argue that like he's so wrecked and heartbroken that he reevaluates everything she said about him and is like, this is where I was completely wrong. And
I understand what the intent is. I don't think you have to argue on behalf of the screenwriter. I get what they're trying to do, but it doesn't work. It fundamentally doesn't. It's not executed the way they're hoping it is. And as a result, it kind of lacks. It just feels like, well, I'm in love now, so I guess I've seen the error of my ways. And then we go back to Queens. And now this scene, again, this is another scene that feels like they like had this in their back pocket and like it's like such a well-crafted reveal. It maybe goes on like a little bit too long, especially with like 17 minutes left in the movie. And you're like, how are they going to wrap any of this up in a satisfying way? But like you get this great scene where like she's in Queens and her whole family is coming over and like she's like, I don't understand. Why is everybody here? And they're like, oh, it's going to be such a big deal.
It's her birthday. And
It's her birthday.
She don't want a party. She feels super depressed.
And then the mother comes in and she's like, well, he didn't want us to tell you, but you got to stay here. And she's like, what do you mean who didn't want you? And she's like, he reached out and he felt bad about the way things ended and da-da-da-da. And you're like, oh shit. Like, that's the guy, right? Okay, fine. And then she opens the door and it's like some dude she used to date.
In middle school.
But, okay. Why not give me that guy in the beginning of this movie? Like, why not open this movie with this guy trying? And then the movie ends with the door opening and you're like, oh, ha ha ha, it's that guy, of course. Like, it just being some random guy from middle school was like, I guess.
That, again, that part, that part was not one of the things that I was like so bothered by. Again, I was really bothered by no fulfilling arcs with the kids and like breezing over it. And then also like kind of bungling the big, like you said, sort of like undercutting the big fight by having her reveal a secret when it should have been revealed by someone else. But I also did laugh really hard because this guy shows up and he's clearly like stuck.
Funny.
And he's like, you were so great in like my musical rendition of Rosemary's Baby, like in the 8th grade. And the mom's like, sing it. And he literally goes, I love you, Ro. Don't keep me waiting. This embryo belongs to Satan. And it's just like the idea that like an 8th grader made a musical rendering of Rosemary's Baby was very silly and very funny. And I was like, ooh, that's kind of the punch up type of joke that we should have had the whole rest of the
movie. Yeah.
And
the whole movie.
Yes.
I think for me, those jokes got lost because they were so few and far between that like it wasn't like, oh yeah,
well, then we do some real quick wrapping up because
oh my gosh,
now we have
right out of The Nanny, by the way, like the kiss on the steps in the moonlight. She loves moonlit kisses on stoops. Fran Drescher.
Well, so there's this really disastrous party. She's just like so depressed at where her life is right now. She doesn't have a job. She doesn't have a partner. She is obviously in love, but like couldn't be with this guy for all these reasons. She goes to sit out on the stoop. And then while she starts to cry, somebody hands her a tissue. She looks up. It is Timothy Dalton, who we forgot to mention has a makeover in this movie because he's dressed very much like Stalin and has a mustache for like the first half. And then she convinces him to shave the mustache and he starts wearing turtlenecks and blazers. And he is a new man. Truly. You're like, wow, the clothes do make the man. But so then, anyway, it's Timothy Dalton standing there in a turtleneck.
It makes you wonder why Putin dresses the way he does.
Ugh, so I know it really does. But
right?
I mean, I don't think
because he's not dumb and he's got a lot of money, so it's like you'd think.
But
unless that's
money can't buy you class. Money can't buy you class.
That's true.
And
amen, sister.
Anyway, she looks up and it's him. He declares his love for her. And then in literally one sentence, he goes, and I have freed the prisoner and I'm scheduling free elections for the fall. And then she's like, oh, wonderful. And then they kiss. That's the end of the movie.
Literally the credits roll. I was like, oh, okay. Well, I guess he's fine. We don't see the kids again. She never gets to we never get a moment where she's like back in their lives. Like it's just, man, it really started out so promising. And then I just feel like it kind of whiffs, but I do want to say, I will wrap up my thoughts in defense of the movie. I read a lot of reviews and I do have to say that I think it's super lame that like critics were complaining about her voice out of everything that you could complain about in this movie. That's the thing I saw the most in most reviews were like, the voice is annoying to listen to for this long. Like, who could put up with this? And it's like, she's not even doing like, she's literally just like talking normal for most of the movie. She doesn't really do like any like squeaky high Fran
it's
stuff.
Literally, I read Roger Ebert's review and I also watched one. He harps on it so much. And I'm just like, oh my God, I forget how much I fucking hate Roger and Ebert. Like,
it's just like, there's no, so like, I you know, there were, look, I had a lot of reasons. I wouldn't even going to seek out the reviews to this movie. I didn't do it till after. And I did it because I was like, oh boy, I can't wait to see like what critics said about this. And then no one like even spent their review pointing out any of these actual issues. They were just like, her voice is annoying and it feels like the nanny. And it's like, okay.
They were also dunking on Timothy Dalton's performance, which I had zero problems with.
Zero. He was
They're
fine.
literally like, ugh, like, you know, wow, like what a embarrassing thing for him. And I'm like, it was exactly what he needed to be for this role. Like he actually balanced like anger, severity, and then like sort of in a very Charles Shaughnessy way, like, oh, but he's actually kind of just like this bubbling, sweet, you know, good-hearted guy under there.
And the kids were great for the screen time that they got. Like they were well cast. And dude from Ace Ventura was excellent. I wish he got more to do because he was very funny. I don't even think that you needed the prime minister at all. Like the third act of this movie, the Darkest Night of Soul of this movie would have been the moment that all of the truths come out, and you don't need a bad guy for that necessarily.
No,
like
I think it
could have come from both of them, you know?
I know. I think having a shit stirrer to like kind of out her was important. That didn't, and I also think, you know, having this person who is seeing the changes in him and thinking they are alarming as opposed to really positive, I kind of like that. Also, really quick, did you see the photo of Fran in braces on the piano in her house in Queens?
I did.
There's a real life picture of Fran. And then I just wanted to call out one. I have one, just there was a line in that scene when she's
is this a segment? Are we doing segments?
Oh, I thought we wouldn't because there's so much. I mean, let's see. We've already,
and now segments.
So, segments.
Yeah, no, I think we should move on to segments.
We can move on to our segments.
And now, segments.
Segments with Shawn and Toria.
I just wanted to play this song.
Well, okay, because this is not really enough to make. Well, it actually might make enough to be a segment, but
one segment.
You know how I said that, like her back at her house in Queens, in the third act was like had some of the funniest like joke for joke moments. The other was, she's like, "Mom, where's my pet chicken?" And then she's like, "He's fine. He's right over there." And she looks, and this chicken is eating chicken, and she goes, "Mom, you fed the chicken?" And her mom's like, "What am I supposed to do? Make 2 dinners?" As if I don't already have enough to do. It was just a very funny thing. And also, there was a couple words of Yiddish.
There was some Yiddish, and there's some trivia. I mean, there is some trivia. Fran took voice lessons to alter the quality of her voice, which is why I think it's pretty shitty that they got on her. And then so much so that the producers were like, just use your natural voice. And I think that ultimately she like didn't go as full like Fran Fine, and it's weird that people like complain about it. Also, the newspaper that Timothy Dalton was reading is a Turkish newspaper, and it's called Hürriyet, and the word means freedom in Turkish. So that's interesting. It's like a little originally also Fran wanted the movie to be a spin on The King and I, titled The King and Oi. But they couldn't get the rights, so she did Beautician and the Beast instead, which I think is really funny that it just comes out to that. Something that
I thought was interesting was I looked up the costume designer because, you know, we talked a lot about Brenda Cooper from The Nanny, and it was not Brenda Cooper who worked on this. It was a woman named Barbara Fank. And at first I was really surprised, but then I thought about it and I'm like, actually, like this woman isn't, well, no, she actually is wearing a lot of Fran-esque outfits.
Yeah,
I mean, not
is.
as bold. Like it's not
No.
like, you know, like candy bars, you know, woven into her, you know, jacket, but she has like a little Jackie O look. I actually, I was like, oh, I wonder what the story was. Like, I wonder if maybe they wanted her to, but maybe, you know, obviously when you're dealing with like studios and movies, like everybody has like their person that they want to hire. So, but I was curious about that. But the other thing I was gonna say for Yiddish, they use the word mensch, which is like, you know, like a good person, you know, a good-hearted person who does the right thing. And then also pincher, which is a young, inexperienced, presumptuous person. I think she calls young Carl that.
Yeah. Yeah. There was definitely Yiddish in this movie. I'm pretty sure you're right. I think she is Jewish. She just doesn't have a Jewish name.
Which is like so interesting. Like I wonder why they made that choice, right? Like,
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't really know. I tried. I looked up so much stuff to try to find any like interview with the writer to like understand. There's nothing. He wrote the TV movie The Notebook in 2021, and he wrote something called The Crowded Room in 2023, a miniseries. I don't know. Tom Holland is in it. Interesting.
Yeah. Well, also,
oh, that was the Tom Holland thing where he's got like multiple personalities. Got it.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Right. Yeah. I did not get good reviews.
I was also going to say, I thought this was really unfair too, that Fran Drescher was nominated for the Golden Raspberry Award for Worst Actress this year. I like she wasn't bad. She was a great comedian.
Yes.
And
agreed.
So I do think some of the, again, it's like the criticism was misplaced in a lot of the reviews. I totally agree with you. And I was going to say that maybe another big difference as to like why I think I was maybe a little more forgiving and just along for the ride is I had read all the reviews first. I did my research before watching. So I kind of was prepped for certain things. So I was like, I was going and expecting Timothy Dalton to be like, not great because that's what they were saying. And I was expecting, you know,
interesting. No, I went in completely cold. I really didn't know anything other than the poster of this movie, which I had seen a million times, but never felt compelled to check out the movie itself. And I'm glad I did it that way. Honestly, I think I would have had a harder time getting through it. I liked watching it like a movie where you don't know what's going to happen and you're either into it or you're taken out of it. And I was so into it that I think I got a little frustrated as it continued because it just completely took me out. You know what I mean? By the end. What's next? What is the future for this podcast, Toria? What are we going to do?
Oh no. Oh, that's your, oh no. I was still thinking about the movie because I'm looking through my notes.
Is there any, do you have more movie stuff?
Well, I just also wanted, I think it's very interesting when you put this type of thing in the context of the 90s, making the leap from TV to movie was like huge for people. And it like a lot was riding on it. And it was like, okay, is this going to make me a movie star? Because this was well before prestige television where like Nicole Kidman is like, I'm in 2 seasons of a mini series and Hugh Grant is doing what, like now every big star is like gravitating towards TV. They almost prefer prestige television to movies. For our younger listeners, it is like you could count the people that made the jump that, you know, from TV to
George Clooney.
One hand. He was the big one that everybody was like, but he did it. And TV actors.
But Fran was doing movies, to be fair, before TV. You know, I mean, so Fran's an interesting one with that.
Yeah,
you know, she was in Saturday Night Fever. She was in Hollywood Nights. She was in, you know, she had a little thing in 9 to 5. She had a pretty big thing in Spinal Tap. Like she had done like movies. She was not the star of a movie until Beautician and the Beast. And that comes in, I believe, season 4 of The Nanny is when this movie happens.
But I would say that before The Nanny, she was not a recognizable name. There was a, really good likelihood that like you'd be
Agreed.
like, wait, she was in Spinal Tap. Who was she in Spinal Tap? And you'd be like, oh my God, it's not like she was very well known in television, in movies before she did The Nanny, even though she was in some incredible projects. So it basically was like the TV to movie star jump because she was very famous in the national consciousness in one context, which was sitcom. And now people were going to have to readjust to movie. And I do think it's like, so people would strategize about how to do it. And it's interesting that, her strategy was, not being too different from what people were used to. Mm-hmm. I feel like usually the strategy that worked better though, is when somebody was completely different, because then everyone's like, oh my God, they're actually, like when Courtney Cox from Friends was in the Scream franchise, I feel like people were like, wow, like that was awesome, because she was such a different person than Monica on Friends.
Agreed.
And so it was an interesting choice. But no, that was my only other big thought was, I was just remembering like, oh yeah, remember when if you were a sitcom star or even a drama star on TV, you were such a less than in the entertainment industry. And it was like a total lottery if you might ever make it in the movies.
Yeah.
And there were some people that like their whole career trajectory was like, well, I'll never do TV because then I'll be pigeonholed as a TV person and I want to be a movie star.
Yeah, no, it was like there was a stigma. There was definitely a real stigma. The Quentin Tarantino movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, touches on that a little bit about the stigma between movie star and television star. So if you're interested in that, go ahead. And
we should have put this up front, but if anyone was interested, this movie was technically considered like a box office bomb. It grossed about 11.5 million and the production budget was 16 million. Yeah. So it didn't, recoup its money, and it was filmed in 1996 and released in 97. So this would have been truly the height of like The Nanny's popularity.
Yeah, this was the middle. I looked it up. Season 4, they had come out, and that was the season with all the guest stars. So like she was at her hottest right here. So in the context of like Hollywood, it's a whiff, right? It's like a big deal. Like that was like the big movie shot. And then like, she didn't make back the money on a comedy, which is a shame because I do think Fran is incredibly talented. And I think it's a shame that this didn't work out for her,
Yeah, it's also funny because I'm looking at my notes and when I'm talking about jumping from TV to movies, I just wrote George Clooney famously did it. Like literally, that's how
George Clooney.
There's like two people you could think of. But so,
and look, it didn't hurt her career ultimately. I mean, this lady is prolific with the amount of roles and shows that roles she's done, shows she's starred in, and also produced. Like her career, if you look at her IMDb, this movie is like, okay, yeah, that came out in 1997. And then she worked for like 3 more seasons of The Nanny until 99. And then she worked 2000, 2003, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12, 13, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 22, 20, 22, 23. And she's got stuff in development right now. So it's like, it didn't hurt her career. It maybe hurt her being like a movie star. But
also, I wanted to say, Shawn, are you the joy or the president? Are you the dictator or the beautician?
I am the beautician in this case, not the beast, because I'm pretty anti fascism and authoritarianism. So I feel like I was really excited at first because I was like, oh, this will be fun to watch this lady like deprogram this fascist. And then that's not really what the movie was about. So I think that is who I am. What about you? You're the dictator?
You know what? No, I am the IRA. I'm the IRA because I would be the yes man, but would feel bad about it. Like I would not have the courage to ever speak up, but then would be like trying to secretly be like, no, like why don't we just, let you guys go and the president doesn't have to know about this.
I think you would. Yeah.
Yeah.
That tracks for you. All right. Well, look, I think at the end of the day, I'm glad we watched it. I'm glad we got a chance to talk about it. This was fun to do. I hope people aren't upset with us that we didn't like it. But I feel like we've always been like very honest about how we feel about stuff. So it's not like we've only like heaped praise and now we're like, oh, this was terrible. Like, and like, look, I think that there are a lot of great elements that could have worked so much better. I'm more disappointed, I guess, than anything. Cause like I wanted this to be like a hidden gem that like, right. Where you're like, oh man, more people should watch this. Cause they really like nailed it. And I was so hopeful in that first act. So that's my feelings on it, but I am really glad that we got to do this. Toria, what about you? Are you glad we watched it?
I'm totally glad we watched it because again, like I like seeing Fran do anything. So it wasn't like, to me, it wasn't like a slog. It was like there was definitely some highlights, and then I was definitely very aware of the flaws as they emerged and kind of got more obvious as it went along. It definitely had tons of potential. I totally agree with you. But it's like I still like overall net positive that like it was fun to watch this movie, even if it was not the best. And I feel like I could probably watch any movie and talk about it for 2 hours. Like, I like watching movies,
Yeah, me too. But before we go, I do want to say that if you, for some reason, want to listen to the podcast again or want to share it with people, or if you're new and this is your first episode and you're like, oh wait, there's a whole nanny podcast connected to this, you can go to that now and hear it on YouTube, because I started a little Mr. Sheffield YouTube channel, and it's just like auto uploaded all of our episodes to like a little podcast. YouTube has like a little podcast feed now. Ooh, so damn. I just put that there because I thought it would be neat to have it. And so you can go and do that if you really want to. There's nothing to see. There's no video.
You know what I hate? Can I say what I hate? I hate people that film their podcasts and post it on YouTube, because I'm like, the whole point of podcasts is you can be moving around and doing stuff while you're listening to them. Yeah. Why do I want to watch the two of you talk to each other for an hour and 20 minutes?
Yeah, and it's so funny because like everyone always is like, you got to film your podcast. Like people want to see it, and it's like I don't understand. I don't get it. I don't want to be on camera. I really don't. So not for this podcast.
Yeah. Hey, we have faces for radio, and I think we're comfortable with that.
Thank you. It's hard enough to do social media, let alone I want people to sit and look at me for an hour and 40 minutes. I'm excited to watch something else with you, though. I don't think that will be the end of this feed. We'll find something else to watch at some point. I was looking again at all of the Fran Drescher shows, and I decided Living with Fran seems like the most fun one, because I like the idea of her dating a younger man, and also like a bunch of nanny people will show up on it. And it's only like 3 seasons, and they're only like 12 episodes each. So I was like, oh, I would watch that. That seems fun. So,
or we dive right into dinosaurs.
Baby.
It would be the Not the Mama podcast.
That's right. All right. Well, look, as always, this was
Shawn,
yes.
If we did that, we would need the artist who we did for the
Jamie,
to make us dinosaurs.
Yeah, I know. I would make you the mom and me the baby. Or we do the gender swap thing again, and I'm the mom and you're the baby. That's funnier. That's what it should be.
Okay, listeners, we'll put out a poll.
We'll do something. All right, look, thank you as always. We love you so much. Thank you for listening. Oh, Mr. Chef Pod on all of the places where social media exists, which is really only Instagram, and I won't acknowledge the other place anymore.
Oh, what about our OnlyFans? Did we tell them about that?
Toria. God.
Also, everybody, we miss you. You were a part of our lives for 3 years.
We miss you so much. Please write to us and say hi and stuff. We love the attention and we crave it. And I'm certainly dying inside without it. I don't know about you, Toria. Yeah. All right.
For sure.
All right, Toria, guess what? Bye.
The Flashing Girl from Flushing, the nanny named Fran.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
Miss Fine.